Spotlighting Hawaii's leaders.
We want to bring in Governor David Ige.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Lieutenant Governor, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. Mayor Derek Kawakami.
Thank you so much, Senator, for being here.
Spotlighting the issues.
Where is the virus right now in our community?
How much is this overall going to cost the state?
How are you responding to the community's concerns? Talk about the level of citations that you guys are writing.
Spotlight Hawaii with Yanji Denise and Ryan Kalei Suji on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser.
This episode of Spotlight Hawaii is brought to you by Longstrugs.
Aloha and good morning. Thanks so much for joining us here on the platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser for another edition of Spotlight Hawaii. I'm Ryan Kalei Suji, joined by Yanji Denise. And we thank all of you for tuning in already on this Monday morning and starting your week off with us. It has been quite a busy weekend. And before we get to our guests, we just wanted to congratulate the Rainbow Wahine basketball team for their win over, in the Mountain West Conference Championship. They will be representing the state in the NCAA tournament against Baylor coming up, and they'll be leaving for Waco in just a few days, but wanted to give a quick shout out to the Rainbow Wahine for doing so well over the weekend, Yanji.
Yeah, wonderful to have something to cheer about. We're so happy for the women as they head off on this adventure. Someone who, of course, is a big fan of UH athletics overall is our guest this morning, and that is Governor David Ige. We head over to the Capitol. Good morning, Governor.
Aloha, Yanji and Ryan. Thank you so much for including me today. And I did want to send my congratulations out to the Rainbow Wahine for winning the Big West Conference Championship. And mahalos and thank you to Amy Atwell, who was selected as Player of the Year. And congratulations to Laura Beeman as Coach of the Year. You know, I'm so happy that Amy decided to come back for this season, and certainly winning the Big West Championship is just a terrific send-off for really a terrific student athlete.
Yeah, really excited to see them play this coming week. Let's get started with some of the other issues that are happening here in our own state. I want to start off with COVID-19 and where we're at. Of course, you made the announcement last week about plans for the removal of the mask mandate. If you can talk a little bit more about that decision. There are some in the community who are asking, why not lift the mandate now? Why wait to the end of this emergency proclamation? Your thoughts as you continue to hear back from the community about this?
Yeah, just thanks, Ryan, for that question. It is because we're still seeing the 7-day average is still above 100. It's about 140, I think, today. And so even though the case counts are coming down and COVID patients in the hospital continue to fall, it's still pretty high. And as we talked about the last time, the mayors did drop all of the restrictions on in the county level. And certainly we're wanting to make sure that COVID continues to fall in our state and we don't have a surge or we don't establish a new baseline that's higher than our healthcare system can deal with. And so we like the trend. We want to make sure that it is sustainable going forward. And I think it's important that all of us continue to wear our mask indoors until midnight, March 25th.
I want to ask you a little bit more about kids and masks. When we talked last time, you had said that you thought that perhaps keeping a just blanket policy of masks on all campuses all the time was sort of the easiest way to enforce that policy. The DOE is now going to allow students to not wear a mask outdoors in outdoor settings if they choose not to. But it seems like they're still keeping the mask on in the classroom. Once your proclamation ends and indoor masking is not mandated for folks inside, do you think it should go away in the classroom as well?
Yanji, I'm certain that the department will be working with LibHR and the Department of Health to really look at the case counts that we're seeing in the schools. The NIH just recently issued a study that said that those school districts that had mandatory masks indoors resulted in 72% less COVID cases than those that had optional mask policies or that had mask required sometimes indoors, but not all the time. So, we'll be continuing to watch the case counts that we see. The COVID cases in the school hasn't dropped as quickly as the overall COVID cases in the community, but we do know that eventually the case counts in the schools will drop just like in the general community.
With the safe travels program also coming to an end for those who are coming into the state for domestic travelers, I'm wondering if you can share a little bit more about the state's plan when these international visitors begin returning. I know that you had mentioned trying to work with the TSA to possibly integrate a program that's more on that level. But for the international visitors, what would that system look like for those who may be leaving the country, including locals who may be leaving and trying to come back in, or for those visitors who are visiting from other destinations? What would that process look like?
Yes, Ryan, thanks for that question. Right now, the CDC and the TSA is requiring airlines to ensure that every passenger who boards a flight to the US fully complies with the CDC guidance. And right now, that guidance is fully vaccinated individuals only, and they have to take a pre-travel test to show that they're negative. The one real big difference with international is, for our safe travels, we required a PCR or NAT test. For international travelers, they do accept a rapid antigen test, but they do have to do it within 24 hours of boarding the flight. So, we are working really hard to bring back, especially travelers from Japan. As you both know, they're our most important international origin. I would like to note that, although the COVID cases are coming down in Hawaii and in the US, they are really surging across Asia. South Korea is still increasing case counts, and they're setting records every other day or so. Case counts in Japan is falling, so we're hoping that they've peaked out and they are on the downside. But cases are increasing in Australia and New Zealand. And, for most of this pandemic, they were virtually at zero because they really shut down international travel into those communities.
There's a question here from Miguel asking what about public transportation? We know that the federal government is mandating till at least April 18th wearing masks in airports and on airplanes. Does that trickle down to public transportation like city buses as well, or what is the requirement there?
Yanji, I do think it trickles down to the bus because we do get quite significant funding from the federal government to run the bus system. So right now, the new policy or the policy for masking applies on the bus as well as in the terminals. I know that the CDC and the federal government is really looking at how they can be more specific about mask wearing both on flights as well as on public transportation.
I'm wondering, as we start to see the easing of these restrictions, how things have changed just in the things that you have become accustomed to doing over the last 2 years. The weekly phone calls with the mayors to do these check-ins, all these other COVID response meetings that you and your team have been doing throughout the pandemic, once, sometimes more than once a week. Are those types of meetings still happening? Are the conversations with the mayor still ongoing, or are those also beginning to phase back now that we are seeing some of the easing of these numbers?
Yeah, Ryan, we continued to meet at least once a week. We did meet last Friday, and we'll probably be meeting this Friday and just kind of talking about phasing down. After that, we'll probably be on call or we'll schedule a lot less frequently. As you know, the Department of Health is moving toward once a week reporting. Obviously, if we see a surge in cases, we will let everyone know. But so we are learning to live with COVID, even though we know that we are not completely out of the woods.
In that phasing down, I'd like to know just on a personal level, what are your plans going forward after the mandate sunsets? Are you still going to wear a mask in your office? Are you going to require your staffers to wear a mask? How are you navigating that on a personal level?
Yanji, I think it's the whole concept, and I think we all have to embrace what it's like to live with an infectious disease. So it's really important to recognize your work bubble and, the people that you see and interact with on a day-to-day basis. Generally, if you're all well and no one is symptomatic, then you know that everyone is not infected or can't get you sick. I think it's when you go outside of that. So if I do have meetings with people that I don't work with every day or I don't interact with every day, I probably will continue to wear a mask indoors. And clearly, when I go shopping well, the mask mandate is still in place, but I'll probably be wearing a mask indoors for at least a period of time. Part of it is that if I get ill, then it really does impact a whole lot of people if I'm not able to be at work.
Want to switch gears here, talk about another important topic in our community, and that is Red Hill. We heard the ruling last week and the decision by the Navy and the announcement from the Pentagon to shut down the facility and defuel the facility. Your thoughts as you heard this announcement, and what are your thoughts about how we move forward on this and ensuring that that the military and the Navy actually follow through on this commitment to defueling Red Hill?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. We continued to, in our private conversations, stress with them how important we believe that the Navy really proved to our community that it could operate Red Hill in a safe way. I was so excited to receive that call from the Secretary of Defense when he told me that they did an analysis and in fact agree that the Red Hill fuel storage facility was built during the war, and clearly today is a different time. A single strategic reserve doesn't make sense anymore. It makes more sense to spread the fuel around, and it certainly would help them operate more efficiently. Now, he also recognized that means they need to make investments in storage elsewhere. But he definitely is committed to working through that. I've got asked a lot of questions. What happens next with Red Hill? So we continue to litigate the case. I know that we are preparing to defend ourselves, even though the Secretary of Defense had announced that they're going to shut it down. We'll continue to be vigilant in court until they withdraw that case. We are working with them. They promised a defueling plan by the end of May. We'll be working with them. The whole question about how the well got contaminated and how we mitigate and remove the fuel from the water supply still is an open issue. We hope to get that analysis in the next several weeks. And then clearly, working to defuel the tanks and shut them down is a longer term project.
And longer term, what does decommissioning actually look like? Will those structures be physically removed from that area, or will they just be drained and then sort of the mountain sealed? What is the long-term plan for that?
Yeah, Yanji, we don't really know. I mean, other fuel tanks, when they're decommissioned, have to be removed completely. There is no other fuel storage facility like Red Hill. So, we're committed to working with the Navy to define what that is. We definitely will not rest until we're certain that any danger to the water system or our community is really mitigated and removed.
And while we know that is good news, there is some that say that, the damage has been done, and we look at the shutdown of that water shaft that supplied a great deal of water to the community, especially in urban Honolulu. In speaking with Ernie Lau, he said that the Board of Water Supply is looking at potentially alternative sites, knowing that they may not ever get that source back, that aquifer, and be able to pull water from that facility or from that aquifer ever again. And so they are taking time that could take billions of dollars, he said, and years to find these different wells, if you will, and go through that process. Who do you think should be responsible for paying that? Is that something that the state would have to jump in and help out with, or is that something that you believe that the Navy and the military should help offset some of those costs for finding these new areas for water?
Ryan, in my discussion with the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, he committed that the Navy will be funding removal of the contaminant and restoration of the watershed. It's really hard at this point in time to say what exactly that means, but certainly we're going to be vigilant and we're going to hold them. They created this situation. They introduced the fuel into the water. They do need to remove it and ensure that we have access to clean, fresh water forever moving forward.
In the meantime, Ernie Lau has asked the community to reduce water consumption by 10% on a voluntary basis. What's the state looking at doing? Obviously, the state uses a lot of water in a number of ways. Are there specific steps that you're looking at right now to reduce consumption given the constraints because that well is shut down? Yeah,
just a couple things, Yanji. Sometimes it gets lost in what's really happening, but we have been in an extended drought all across the state for a number of years. Climate change is real. The weather is changing, and we've been in a drought condition almost continuously, pretty much across the state for at least the last 2 years or so. So I do believe in leading by example, and we'll be looking at the state as a major water user and taking action to reduce our water usage. We do know that we want to lead by example, and certainly reducing watering, looking at conservation. We've been pretty aggressive on our airports in ensuring that we can get to a zero footprint, use non-potable water for landscaping and other kinds of activities. So certainly we're looking at how we can accelerate some of those plans.
Wanted to just get your final thought on this, on how you believe that this situation has impacted the relationship that the state has with the military. I mean, this has been something that has caused an uproar in the community. There is that sense of many who feel like they can't trust the Navy and what they've said over the past few years. Of course, again, it's good news for the decision that they have made, but there seems to be this trust that has been broken. What are your thoughts moving forward on the state's relationship with the military moving forward on not only this project, but any potential projects in the future, and how really they can sell that to the community that may have felt like they got burned through this process?
Ryan, I have in my discussions and conversations with the leadership in the Department of Defense, whether that's Secretary Austin or Secretary Carlos Del Toro of the Navy, I've stressed how the public relationship has been very, very negatively impacted. And, I know that they are committed. They do know that it will take time. Part, as you guys had asked, who pays for cleaning the aquifer? If the Navy drags their feet and all of those kinds of things, then certainly it will be much, much harder to establish the trust that we enjoyed prior to this incident. I do think that many in our community continue to see the Department of Defense and the military as important partners in our community. They're just a little more skeptical when they say things, and they definitely want the state to hold them accountable and ensure that they fulfill the promises that they're making.
I want to get to what's happening at the legislature just in terms of brass tacks. There's a lot of bills that have crossed over, but of course, many did not. Your proposal to give each taxpayer $100 seems like it's stalled out, but there is a proposal to make the earned income tax credit permanent to working families. What do you think about that idea?
Yanji, I think we're all committed to trying to help those who need help the most. And the earned income tax credit is certainly something that we support in concept. we have seen across the country that that it's been abused, that it's been a source of fraud, and we're trying to work very hard to make sure that that doesn't happen here in the islands. I'm still hopeful, and I keep advocating that we should be giving something back to all of our residents, and certainly we need to provide more help for those who need it the most.
There have been a lot of cuts that have been made to departments, of course, during COVID-19, restrictions that were placed, hiring freezes that also were implemented during this time. Are those types of restrictions, do you think, going to be lifted soon, and that type of funding be restored to some of the departments that suffered that? Is that something that you are also advocating for during this session as the budget continues to move forward?
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. And we're telling legislative leaders that we need to restore these cuts and funding for positions that, I think everybody understood that we were in a budget crisis and we had to make cuts that we didn't want to make. But now that the economy is doing better and now that revenues have returned, we continue to remind the legislature that these are really core positions that we need to get restored. We do believe that it helps us sustain the support that we've provided to the community. We know that many government services are really utilized during economic downturns and emergencies. So we do want to restore that. I have lifted the hiring freeze and all the agencies are working. But if we don't get the positions and funds restored, there are really no positions to hire people into.
Heidi's got a question here that's really a whole show, but I bring it in just to say, how will the state diversify the economy and control over tourism? We had Peter Ingram on here recently from Hawaiian Airlines, and he says that they're looking at a robust spring and summer, that the tourists are coming back. Of course, they're still missing that key sector, which is the East Asia market, looking at Japan, South Korea, and China. But that said, we are expecting an influx of tourists. So as we welcome these visitors back, and hiring is up and the opportunities are there for our economy, there always is that question of balance. And so what are you looking at in terms of tourism right now?
Yeah, thanks, Yanji. I do think it's a couple things. And, I have been always against illegal vacation rentals. I do think that the increasing numbers, through 9 million, 9.5, 10 million, was really a result of overwhelming number of illegal vacation rentals. At one point in time, we had about 50% of the available rooms were illegal vacation rentals. What this pandemic has allowed us to do is really identify those and really shut them down. So I applaud the work that the city and county of Honolulu is doing. The mayor and the council is looking at restricting and enforcing the land use laws better so that we can keep the illegal vacation rentals down. I think that serves as kind of a natural cap in the numbers that can come here. In addition, the Hawaii Tourism Authority has really worked on the destination management action plans, working with stakeholders, community members in every county to identify those friction points. And we are working very hard to implement permitting systems to allow us to limit the number of visitors who can visit any location, and really coming up with a way of charging fees to those coming from out of state, and then really investing those funds into keeping our parks better, keeping the infrastructure working so that our residents are not impacted so greatly when the visitors come here.
One of the things that we've also been seeing is just unemployment overall continue to drop here as more people get back to work. But one of the other issues that we are now seeing are that many employers are having a difficult time finding qualified workers. We know that many people have also left the state during the pandemic and to find other jobs and other opportunities. How do you think the state can help fill this void? I mean, you mentioned earlier the state will also be looking to hire some people back into some positions, and it seems that there is just a need overall in the community for many of these positions, some skilled and specific positions. How does the state plan to manage this issue moving forward?
Yeah, Ryan, we are working with the university. I've talked with President Lasner, and we've had a real good discussion over the past couple months as we've worked through the pandemic of really doing a much better job of ensuring we have qualified residents who can fill these positions, especially high wage positions, skilled technicians and craftspeople. There are so many jobs in the healthcare profession that pay very well, but we don't have qualified residents who can fill them. So as you know, Ryan, we do have an initiative this year to increase residents, doctors' residence programs to the neighbor islands. We see the shortage of physicians and we want to take action. We also have a proposal before the legislature to expand nursing and be able to deliver more nurses here for our community. The university is looking at, and we're trying to connect the dots between the Department of Labor and the employers and asking them what types of skills do you need, and really expanding internship programs so that students, before they make decisions at both high school as well as college levels, can explore good paying jobs here and career in the islands, so that we can bring in less people, especially for highly skilled, highly paid jobs. We definitely want to make sure that our residents have the first crack at those jobs.
There's a question here from Kelly that I find interesting. The situation in Ukraine is devastating to look at the humanitarian crisis that's unfolding there. Here in Hawaii, not just in Hawaii, but around the country, we're seeing a rise in oil prices, largely due to that conflict. So she asked, have you considered removing the fuel tax temporarily during this oil supply crisis? Is that something that you could even do? And is that something that you would consider?
Yunji, it's a challenge because we have been underfunding infrastructure. The federal government does provide a lot of funding for highways and infrastructure costs. We've increased assessments, the car rental taxes and those kinds of things to invest in highways. I'm very much concerned about suspending the fuel tax. Because we are already struggling to meet the demands of, highways and roadways here in the state of Hawaii. We are looking at other things that we can do. It's unfortunate that the oil industry is increasing gasoline costs right now. We do know that, the restriction on Russian oil hasn't really or shouldn't have impacted the cost of gasoline. So certainly we're encouraging the gasoline refiners and the oil industry to refrain from raising prices at this time.
Well, our time here is almost up, but we did just want to provide you quick final thoughts as we move forward. During this time, the state continues to move out of these COVID restrictions. We're seeing positive advancements with Red Hill. Your final thoughts this morning as we move on here through the rest of this year.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. As you know, this is the 50th anniversary of Title IX. And, just a reminder that one person can make a difference. Patsy Mink really dedicated her life to public service, and she's the brainchild behind Title IX. And we see today how higher education has really changed over the last 50 years, and women have so many more opportunities because of one person choosing to make a difference. I just would want to encourage everyone. Certainly we are moving past this pandemic, and hopefully all learn how to live with COVID as we move forward. I do think that I truly appreciate everyone making the sacrifices that have led to Hawaii having the lowest per capita infection rate and amongst the lowest death rate in the country. And it really says a lot about our community, people willing to make sacrifices. And certainly I encourage everyone to make sure that their voice is heard, stand up for what you believe in. And truly, a single person can make a difference if they choose to. So thank you. Aloha and mahalo to everyone.
Aloha. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Aloha. Thanks, Governor.
That is a nice note to end on, especially in light of how well the Wahine did over the weekend and really celebrating Patsy Mink and all that she did, not just for our state, but for the entire country and for girls everywhere. So thanks to the governor for bringing that up. Also, thanks to him for covering a wide variety of topics. We talked about Red Hill, talking about masking. He himself saying that he will be sort of adjusting to the lifting of the mask mandate, also that he won't take it off entirely right away, but that in certain settings, when he's around people whose vaccination status he doesn't know, he still does intend to wear a mask when it comes to professional settings, and saying that at this point, the DOE is working with the DOH, but we don't expect to see students in the classroom get rid of the mask on that same date.
And we also heard him holding firm on his decision to extend, of course, the mask mandate into the end of this current emergency proclamation. There have been some in the community that have been asking for him for the removal of the mandate immediately and right away. But the governor's saying that we will continue to see how things are playing out. We do see the numbers going down, as he said, and that there are other things that are happening. Of course, he brought up spring break in the past as an indicator as well. So just wanted to pay extra cautious before that mandate is removed later this month. But we also heard from an update of how the COVID task force team with the Department of Health and as well as with the mayors, their meetings will begin to be scaled back on an as needed basis moving forward. Of course, these are a group of individuals who have worked a lot and met many times over the span of the past 2 years. But the governor's saying that now's the time for them to move back to other business and matters at hand and not necessarily require these weekly and sometimes twice a week meetings.
Yeah, and also interesting to hear on the Red Hill issue that they are still proceeding, as planned with their lawsuit. That until the Navy basically drops their side, they're going to proceed as planned, even though they've gotten these public assurances that the fuel facility will be decommissioned. Until that case is dropped in court, Hawaii is still fighting.
Yeah, and we also got an update on his thoughts on things happening down in the legislature, his stance on, of course, his proposal that would have given local residents $100. That looks to be dead, but there looks to be other ways in which the legislature is looking to provide some money back to local residents. The governor is saying that ultimately he believes that the money should be in the hands of those taxpayers and those who deserve it the most, and not necessarily have it just go straight to other programs or new ventures, but having money in the hands of the people is what he said he will continue to advocate for, regardless of the vehicle in which it is delivered.
Yeah, so we are going to be continuing our conversation about state issues on Wednesday. We're going to be talking about Aloha Stadium and the redevelopment plans there. We'll be talking to the head of the neighborhood board in that community, along with Senator Glenn Wakai, who obviously represents that area and has been very involved in the Aloha Stadium redevelopment plans.
Look forward to that conversation. We hope we'll see you back here on Wednesday for another episode of Spotlight Hawaii. Aloha.
Aloha.
This episode of Spotlight Hawaii is brought to you by Long's Drugs.